Hello, this is the My Artifact episode number 3966. Today's date is 27 March 2025. It's been almost like a morning at 7:19 a.m. Okay, I got mail from digital community. Yeah, whatever. All right. So should we ask question? Yeah. Okay, probably this thing now I have very less amount of time to kind of like assembly ask question because like a lot of stuff to do. Okay, yeah. So let's just ask question quickly. Okay, yeah. Okay, first of all, are we recruiting the strongest possible candidate into teaching, especially undeserved geographics and subjects, or merely filling vacancies? What exactly is this question? Okay, this question is actually about Indian education system. Why am I asking this question to myself? I wanted to become a education minister of India, and before I wanted to become that particular person, I wanted to aware of every situation regarding about education system, so that I would take a wisely decision according to it. All right. So regarding about the question, I'm kind of like a simplified this question in simple language. Okay, the question is actually says that thing: are we hiring best teacher? And second question is that ki why teacher does not want to move in village, like why, if we kind of like a hire one of the best teacher, why they does not want to move to the village to kind of like a teach village student and things and that. Okay, first of all, first question: are we hiring the best teacher? Let me kind of like tell you the perspective. I'm living in India, and teacher situation are not really good in here. Ask anyone, who do you want to become? Teacher would not be the kind of like answer. Yeah, most of people might gonna say engineer, doctor, IT, things and that. Teacher, they does not kind of like want to become. And why? Because of that, they don't really think that teacher is a kind of like a very respected job. Okay, and why is that? Because way that kind of like a teacher is way that kind of like a something that ki people have influence regarding about teacher, like it's kind of like a thing that na ki people don't really understand that how much value that teacher has, and how much kind of like a somebody the power they could kind of like a change the entire civilization. But like basically we don't really consider that much important. Okay, yeah. When the people are not really considered that much important, as well as government is also not really considered that much important, and when the government is not actually considered that much important, they are kind of like a simply giving us such a salary which is not really important, like not really that much valuable. And when they are kind of like a simply providing very less amount of kind of like a salary, then their performance is kind of equivalent to a salary. Like basically it's this thing: if you are kind of like somebody getting 5000 rupees of month, would you kind of like somebody spend like would you kind of like somebody put lot of effort to teaching? Definitely not, na. Like basically saying, why would you supposed to kind of like spend too much amount of effort to teach student and things and that for just 5000 rupees? And definitely not. And as also it's just not just about of money, it's about the kind of like somebody respect. Okay, yeah. Is that thing that keep like it's a kind of like a cycle is actually create. Okay, yeah. The government is like basically we don't really consider teacher is a kind of like a respected job, as well as the government is also think that it's not respected job. When it's not actually happened, teacher is not kind of like a doing the proper job. When the teacher is not actually doing the job, then kind of like a people actually suffer that this teacher is not actually doing a job. It's kind of like a create a perception regarding about teacher are bad. And when the teacher are kind of like a bad, the profession is not supposed to be kind of like we wanted to execute entire life. So basically is this thing that the perception became that teacher is kind of like a somebody really not so good. So when that perception kind of like a create, people started thinking like that. When the people started thinking like that, government also think that okay, we shouldn't supposed to pay that much amount of teacher to that much amount of salary. And when they are not putting that much amount of salary, the teacher is not kind of like putting that much amount of effort to teaching. And when they are not teaching, it's continuously cycle is actually happening. Okay, yeah. And when that continuous cycle is actually happening, it's a kind of like a thing that na ki the quality of teacher is not actually improved, and as well as the teaching is not really improved. So this is kind of like some cycle breaks. And the main crux is actually happening is because of that we didn't really think teacher is a kind of like a respected job. And that is true, that is true. I'm believing in India, my father is a teacher, and literally just like that na ki, like I don't know, but it's just like that in India. teacher is not a respected job and things and that. Okay, yeah. So basically this thing, when the kind of like a somebody teacher is not actually respected a job, then who do you want to become a like who like the very less people are wanting to become teacher. Like people who are kind of like a went into the teaching is because of they don't really have any option. Like basically they are kind of like a being a teacher is because of that key, a kind of like a government job, or kind of like a getting the pension and things and that's it. Okay, yeah. They doesn't really have any kind of like a passion for kind of like a something like teaching and things like that. Another thing, teaching is a art form, is not a profession. It's art form, like literally teaching is art form. Yeah, it's a kind of like a dancing is art form, sketching is art form, singing is art form, teaching is also art form. It doesn't really matter that how much information that you have regarding about that subject. It's matter that how should you supposed to be explain that subject in simple language, as much like in simple language so that student would understand. So basically is this thing na, the kind of like assembly we understand that ki this particular this particular teacher who kind of like wrote a lot of science books and things and that, so probably our government kind of like a thing that ki this particular person is a really good teacher. But having more knowledge about particular subject and getting that knowledge to the student is a kind of like a two different thing. This particular person might not be really good person to kind of like execute his idea to a student because he is not a teacher, he is a kind of like a scientist or kind of like a somebody the writer or things and that. But being a teacher is an art form, it's a kind of like a thing that how should you supposed to be explain stuff to a students. Okay, and that is a kind of like a thing that ki most of the kind of like a people are getting wrong. Most of people kind of consider that ki teacher is just kind of like a job, but that is not job, it's an art form. It's a kind of like a thing, something like kind of like a, something, imagine that na, a kind of like hundreds of people are kind of like looking at you and you are kind of like a try to explain. Let me kind of like give you a similar example. Oh yeah. So let's just say in the movie making process, the writer is a kind of like a try to explain the story to the rest of the unit, director, producer, actor, dop, everything, and he explained this kind of like a something that story to hits. And basically how he kind of like explain through his art form, he kind of like explain, add kind of like a synthesize on kind of like some sort of emotions and things and that. He does not just read a script, he actually wrote the script, but he does not read the script. When he tried to pitch that idea, he pitched that idea with passion, intention, with lot of creativity that he has. Okay, yeah. So that's why it's kind of like a somebody that story will kind of like a sell, producer will want to make a movie and things and that. Same thing happened with a teacher too. Teacher also kind of like a try to explain stuff to the hundreds of students. So as a writer is a kind of like somebody considered as a creative job, then why not teacher are kind of like a creative job, right? They are kind of like a try to explain the same thing na. Okay, so this is what it is. Most of people actually consider that teacher is not a kind of like a something like teacher is like most of people kind of consider it's a job, but it's not a job, it's a creative art form. Okay, and that's a very much essential. Okay, yeah. Now another thing is that ki, why does kind of like a something is this thing we have lack of teachers. Okay, yeah. Because first of all perception is that ki teacher is not actually good, and I don't want to become a teacher, or I will become a teacher when it has a kind of like only last option. That's it. Okay, yeah, that's it. So because of we don't really get the quality of teacher. Okay, yeah. And even if we get the quality of teacher, those quality of teacher does not going to move to the villagers and things and that. Why? Because obviously is this thing na ki let me kind of like assembly, the quality of the teacher are already very less. Okay, yeah. So basically is this thing, if they are kind of like understand, if the teacher are really good, they are kind of like a really great, so what they will kind of expect, they will kind of like expect to a kind of like a teacher's student, they are actually from city, so that they kind of like somebody get lot of better like better kind of like somebody value. Like let me kind of like tell you, if the school is actually village, which quality of student will kind of like go to the village and teach to the village student? Does not. Okay, yeah. If the quality of teacher kind of like decided that no, I will not gonna go to that village, I will kind of like make sure that I will kind of like simply stay in the city and probably kind of like simply teach the students and things and that. Okay, yeah. So that's why you might found a kind of like a really good teacher in big city, but in villagers there is no there is no teacher at all. Okay, yeah. Now this is the kind of like upper layer of worse thing. There is even worse layer thing too. Okay, yeah. So let me kind of like tell you about villagers point of perspective. Okay, yeah. So because of in the village, there is very less amount of teacher will want it to go, and even if the teacher who kind of like a go there are very less experienced. Okay, yeah, they just kind of like somebody don't want to kind of like somebody go there and things and that, but still they are going is because of that ki government are kind of like forcing them to do. Okay, yeah, so they are very less experienced and they don't really have any intention to teach student or kind of like craft and things and that. Let me pause here for a while. Okay, I have to. Okay, so this is a kind of like a some condition that ki teacher are kind of like a very less experienced teacher actually going to a village. Okay, yeah. Now because of very less experienced teacher are going to the village and their credibility is almost negligible and there is no teacher at all. So what does actually happen, that even if the and that village there is a school is actually there, the one teacher kind of like somebody try to teach multiple subjects. One teacher can try to teach mathematics plus physics plus biology. Sometime one teacher kind of like a teach so many subjects because there is no teacher are actually available to teach another subjects. And because of this thing, one teacher cannot be credible enough to kind of like teach that many subject, because knowledge, information and things like that, I already told you teaching is a craft, but also little bit of knowledge required now. Okay, yeah, like how do you supposed to be kind of like a take a class, a physics class, but you are kind of like an expert in biology? Being biology and being physics is a kind of like a two different thing. Okay, yeah, how should you supposed to be kind of like a teach that stuff? It's not, but they don't really have any choice. Very less amount of teacher are actually going to the village, and people are who are actually going to the village, they are very less experienced, so they just kind of like a teach it, that's it. Like basically they just want to fill the gap, that he okay, we don't really have any kind of like a physics teacher, so would you teach physics? And sir, I am not physics teacher. Like don't worry, just teach something, like just read the books and that's it. And they just did it, okay, because they have a job and they just have to fill that job, so they just do it. So this is why the quality of education is not kind of like a executed, and better kind of like a better quality of student will not gonna kind of like evolve and things and that. So how do I kind of like somebody solve this thing in my Gurukul program? Okay, what is exactly my Gurukul program? My Gurukul program is a kind of like a kind of like a some new regime or new kind of like a some system of education. Okay, yeah, I already mentioned regarding about this previous artifact episode. Go check it out. I will gonna talk about kind of like a completely regarding about this particular topic. Okay, yeah. So first of all, I have a kind of like a plans. Okay, yeah, like I have kind of like a problems. Okay, yeah, and I have to solve problem one by one. Okay, first of all is that key why we do not have that many teacher. Okay, yeah, so how do I supposed to solve this problem? By influence. Okay, yeah, I think that na ki I will become something very big person. I don't know, right now I'm kind of like a recording this artifact, and I wanted to implement this kind of like a protocol, this program in after 20 year. Okay, yeah, also right now I am not holding that much amount of attention, but in the future I will gonna hold that much amount of attention. Okay, yeah, lot of eyes are actually looking at me and things and that they might gonna see this video, you might gonna see this video right now, and you are actually understanding that key how kind of like a somebody how you are kind of like a putting that much amount of value because you are still watching this video till now. Okay, yeah, so that's that. Okay, whatever. So basically is this thing na ki I hold so much amount of attention. Okay, yeah, so because I hold so much amount of attention, I wanted to divert that attention towards teaching. Okay, yeah, since I launched my application, I will become little bit of settle regarding about my career and things and that I wanted to do a classes. Okay, like a like just do a classes means like that ki, like a basically what should I supposed to do is that ki I will go to the any kind of like a something the any kind of like a something like a school, okay, yeah, and kind of like a say I wanted to do a guest lecture, and they will say yeah sure definitely you should supposed to do a guest lecture. What I do in that guest lecture is that ki I will kind of like a record my video regarding about how I am teach and things and that with kind of like students and things and that. Okay, yeah. Now because like a basically is this thing na ki first of all is that ki am I credible enough to teach that particular subjects? I am not, might be, okay, yeah. But one thing I'm really good at is that ki I am creative. I I explain stuff easily. Right now I'm kind of like explain this very difficult question to you so that you might gonna understand. So this is a kind of like a talent that I have, that I could explain complicated stuff in very simple language. Okay, yeah. And why I do that thing? Because I do know how does people think. Why? Because I'm kind of like a recording the artifact, and I kind of like understand the how does human psychology works, and how do I supposed to be implement that seeds into the sometime it became plants in the future and things and that. So I have this particular talent. Okay, this like I don't know, but I have it. Okay, yeah. So basically this thing I will go to that school, set up the camera, and I will kind of like do the classes, I will do the teach and things and that with as much as good possible and things and that. Okay, yeah. And short the video, upload that video on YouTube platform. Okay, yeah. Obviously is this thing I will have kind of like a some certain amount of following, that some certain following are kind of like a see my classes, and they will kind of like a simply resonate that ki okay, teacher would be a kind of like a really good kind of like a profession, they should supposed to be understand it's a kind of like a that key they wanted to do it, a teacher too. Okay, yeah. And if I do this thing, most of the kind of like a student, most of the kind of like a people will kind of like a somebody pursue a passion as a teacher. Okay, yeah. Like I will try to do this thing, I'm gonna use my influence to kind of like a somebody is this thing that ki more people are should supposed to be kind of like a somebody get into the kind of like a teaching field and things and that. Okay, yeah. But that is a step one. Okay, just kind of like a initiate and that. Okay, now step two, okay, is that ki when the program launch, okay, when this kind of like a Gurukul program launch, how do I supposed to kind of like make sure that ki I will get the quality of teacher? Okay, yeah. First of all, ask this question: do you really require quality of teacher? If I'm gonna say yes, I really require quality of teacher, but I don't really require that much amount of quality teacher because I changed the distribution process. What do you mean by that? Let's just say I love Khan sir. Okay, yeah. The Khan sir is a kind of like a really good, like the way that he teach. He's a teaching style is a kind of like a very unique. He's from Bihar, and the way that he explained, he's a kind of like a something that he like basically the Bihari tone and things. It kind of like feel funny. Okay, yeah. But it is kind of like something very knowledgeable information, because this particular person is a kind of like a very much knowledge regarding about geopolitics, science and things and that. Okay, yeah. Khan sir have a kind of like a very cult following. I was also kind of like following the Khan sir too. Okay, yeah. So what I'm trying to tell you is this thing na ki I wanted to do this following. Okay, yeah. So that like a basic listening, what should I supposed to do is that ki if I found a kind of like a teacher who is a kind of like a somebody as good as kind of like a Khan sir. Okay, yeah. So what they will gonna do is that ki they will kind of like a teach as a online. Okay, and they will kind of like a teach on online means like that na ki like basically I have my application Gurukul app. Okay, yeah. Soon as the program launch, every kind of like a student will get this tablet. Okay, yeah. And in that tablet there is a Gurukul app, and they will kind of like learn on that thing. Now basically is this thing, teaching is also like if the student who wanted to learn, their also class is actually inbuilt too. Okay, yeah. And in that class there is a kind of like a teacher who kind of like explains stuff, and that teacher are kind of like a quality of Khan sir. Okay, and they are kind of like a teaching this thing. Okay, this is it, this that. So basically is this thing I am kind of like a distributing a quality of teacher towards the kind of like a villagers then things and that. So that kind of like a only villagers kind of like a student will get the quality of education by kind of like a watching the lecture on the kind of like a somebody that app and things and that. Okay, yeah. But it's not the solve the problem. Why? Because of that key, being teaching in front of you and being teacher in front of the screen is a two different thing. When you kind of like a try to teach in front of the screen, then basically you are controlled regarding about how should you utilize your time. Obviously is this thing, you will not gonna kind of like a watch that entire kind of like a some lecture but just kind of like a watching. No, you need an interest too. Okay, yeah, like you need a kind of like a interest to watch that kind of like a lecture. Okay, yeah. And if the teacher he's not kind of like a somebody hold you that much interest on you, then probably is this thing that this particular teacher is not really quality of teacher. Okay, let me tell you one thing, it's a kind of like a somebody YouTube retention game. Okay, yeah, like how should you supposed to be retain people to watch your entire video. So this is what it is, like a quality of teacher would try to explain the stuff as simple, as funny, as good, so that kind of like a somebody lot of student will kind of like a somebody try to hold attention to learn the entire concept. Okay, yeah, so this is the kind of like a things that I want, and that's why I'm kind of like a select that quality of teacher that they will kind of teach in my application and things and that one thing. Okay, yeah. Another thing is that I need a kind of like a real teacher too. Okay, it's not that like basically I would kind of like distribute the classes in online and that's it. It does not work like that. Sometimes it is really essential to kind of like have a kind of like a teacher. Okay, yeah. Now the problem is that let's just say like city is a kind of like always been okay because they will get the quality of teacher and things and that, but villagers are kind of like a big really problem because they don't really get the quality of teacher, quality of teaching and things and that. So how do I supposed to get that thing? First of all is that I have to be stop that let them convince to kind of like somebody go to the village and things and that. No, I wanted to hire such a teacher which is actually from local, actually from village area, actually from that village. Okay, yeah. And that kind of like a people will kind of like a teach the teaching. Okay, but still is this thing, will those villagers people are really good teacher? That's a really good question. They are not. Then how you supposed to be kind of like a teaching them very properly? Well, basically is this thing now, in my Gurukul application, in my Gurukul program, every teacher will get the license. Okay, license for teach. Now why am I kind of like talking about this license? I will gonna explain this later. Okay, yeah. Like okay okay, sorry, let's just kind of like talk about the license. Okay, yeah. So basically this thing, if you wanted to drive any kind of like a car, you need a license. If you wanted to handle any kind of like a weapon, you need a license. License means a kind of like a permission to have that thing, permission to drive the car, permission to have weapon in your hand and things and that. Okay, yeah. But teacher doesn't really have any license. Anyone can able to be teach. Okay, yeah. Which is really good, right? But which is also wrong too. Why? Because let me tell you one thing, because of teacher doesn't really have any kind of like a license, anyone can kind of like a somebody started and became a teacher. Okay, like anyone kind of like like hold the board in front of him, say I will gonna kind of like a somebody started a coaching classes and I will gonna teach you the physics. That's it. Student will gonna come and things and that. Now the problem is that it started coaching, it started tuition classes. Tuition is a wrong thing. Why? Because tuition or coaching classes are only focused on one thing regarding about knowledge or education. How? How? Okay.